Sports. My name is Nathan Simmons, and with me as always, Nathan Kwan. First off, we want to start off and say, please be safe out there. We understand that Hurricane Harvey has made landfall, is already wreaking havoc. Our thoughts and prayers are with the people of Texas right now. But let's start off with some other big news this week. The biggest news this week, I would say, happened in the NBA, even though a single game has not been played. The Kyrie Irving may or may not be a Boston Celtic. Kwan, what are your thoughts right now?
Yeah, the news came down and I was absolutely shocked. The Cavaliers sending Kyrie Irving, who said he's unhappy in Cleveland and wants to take more of a starring role outside of LeBron James' shadow. My first thoughts when I heard this trade was I was stunned by the value that Cleveland got from Boston in trading Kyrie Irving. They're getting Isaiah Thomas, who scored 29 points per game last year. He has 1 year left on a contract. But then they also get wing defender Jay Crowder, who will add to the depth. He was a really solid player the last couple of years in Boston and before that in Dallas. And then Ante Zizic is a 7-foot prospect, and a lot of scouts really like his potential. We didn't really see much of him last year, but I mean, he's so young. So that's a potential cornerstone piece for the future. And then they get Brooklyn's coveted first-round draft pick that the Celtics got in that monster Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett trade way back when. So that's quite a haul, not only for Cleveland's immediate future in that they get Isaiah Thomas, who many called the king of the fourth last year because he led the league in scoring in the fourth quarter, but also they get rotational pieces in Crowder, they get a potential future cornerstone in Zizic, and they get that first round pick in 2018, which one would think would be really good because Brooklyn this upcoming year is probably going to be another terrible team. And so that's preparing if LeBron James indeed does leave, that they have a future. And so this is well done for the new general manager in Cleveland. He just got the job a couple months and pulling off this trade from the Celtics. Now on the Boston side, I mean, Danny Ainge has had all these chess pieces to play with, and this is him cashing them in. Kyrie Irving, he's 25 years old. He's still young. He's just entering his prime. Early on, before LeBron got there in Cleveland, he was not really able to carry that team and be the guy. And so we still need to see how he fits in with Gordon Hayward and Brad Stevens in that Boston Celtics system. Obviously, they need to hope that he resigns after next year when he has a player option, because they gave away all those assets for a 1 year rental. That's not going to be good. So what are your initial thoughts on the trade?
Well, my initial thoughts pretty much are in line with you, is that like the Cavs got away with a great haul. Now, that being said, I'm probably a bit higher on Kyrie. I don't think there really is that much of a chance of Kyrie really bolting unless things really go south in Boston and things just like implode, or like he just doesn't get along with anyone. I mean, there's always going to be that risk of that happening, but like that, like even if they had like drafted him or something like that, like there's always going to be that risk. Now that also being said, and the funny thing is that both Kyrie and Isaiah were drafted in the same draft, with Kyrie being the first overall pick and Isaiah Thomas being the last overall pick in the draft. But the thing is that Kyrie's actually 2 to 3 years younger than Isaiah, and he still has plenty of room to improve. I mean, like granted, like both have not been great at defense, but like Kyrie has the potential to be at least like serviceable at defense. I mean, no offense to Isaiah Thomas, who I think is kind of getting overlooked on some of these talks, just because he's not the best player being traded in this trade. It's Kyrie, and it's always going to be Kyrie. But Isaiah Thomas put up like 28.9 points per game last year, and like you said, he led the league in scoring in the fourth quarter. And like the guy is just a firecracker off the bench when you need offense. But Kyrie, on the other hand, I think has a lot of potential to still grow, and that I think is going to be the most interesting thing to see, is that once he's now kind of like the focal point and the star player of the team, how much is he actually going to improve? How much is he actually going to grow? Is he going to? I mean, I think he has the potential to be someone that puts up more than 30 points a game, and that's, I mean, that right there is MVP caliber stuff. And now that also being said, like the fact that the Cavs were able to get not only Jay Crowder, who, I mean, as a Mavs fan, I remember when we first drafted him using the Cavs pick in the second round. So it's kind of come full circle for him. But I mean, like he's someone that is like kind of a decent 3-and-D guy on the wing. He's also a very solid rebounder. I mean, it was kind of sad to see him go in the Rajon Rondo trade, but I thought at the time we thought it was necessary. I mean, obviously, the biggest thing that the Cavs got was the Brooklyn Nets first-round pick. Now, something that you alluded to recently is that there are some concerns about Isaiah Thomas's injury. And the fact of the matter is that the Cavs are asking for maybe another pick just to further compensate for it. And granted, this is after the physical, so something must have come up during the physical for them to go like, well, we want at least another extra thing to tide us down. And so right now, I don't know what's going on with that. But I mean, at the same time, like, even if they still took the trade and like say like Isaiah Thomas can't play for the rest of the year, yeah, that's not great by any means, and definitely like in some semblance that really does hurt the value of it. But still getting that Brooklyn pick is far and away one of the better things that you could be doing. So, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, more than likely from what I've read, it's still probably going to go through. It's just that like they'll probably try getting a little bit more out of Boston.
Yeah, if I'm Cleveland, I just take the trade and run, because I think they got away with fleecing Boston in this case with the amount of assets that Boston gave up. And if anything, I think if there's a concern over long-term injuries, it's just going to allow Cleveland to be able to sign Isaiah Thomas to a potentially lower contract, because, I mean, after this year, he's a free agent, and, I mean, he's going to get offers. And coming off of last year, he probably would have gotten a max deal with a team. But if there's injury concerns, that might kind of lower the value, and Cleveland might be able to retain him easier. Going back, so the Rockets and the Pistons went through this kind of trade that got nullified because of injury. The Rockets traded Donatas Montaigne to the Pistons at the trade deadline. The trade basically got canceled because Detroit had concerns about Demo's back. And then so Demo had to come back to Houston. And it was just a really awkward situation because, I mean, you're going back to a team that obviously doesn't want you. And they all handled it professionally, that, it's just a business and things like that happen. But I mean, if this trade were to get nullified, Isaiah Thomas already has kind of a fractured relationship with the Boston management, getting an extension or getting another superstar in there. And he's been very vocal about that. And then Kyrie going back to Cleveland, like, we already know about all the things that came out between he and LeBron. And then for him to go back to that situation, how is he going to be able to face teammates if he has to play on that team next year? So I don't think it's a good thing for anybody if the trade gets nullified. I think Cleveland should just go ahead with it. And I think they still, even if Thomas is a little banged up, they still got a great haul in getting that Brooklyn pick, especially from Boston.
For sure. Yeah, no, I absolutely agreed. All right, let's move on now to MLB. The Astros had an interesting week from what I've heard.
Yeah, so this team is still playing around 500 this past week. They won 2 out of 3 against Oakland. They lost 2 out of 3 against the Washington Nationals. And then they're in Anaheim this week, and they won last night. But it's completely flipped. The offense has been really carrying the team for most of the year, and the pitching's been kind of up and down. Right now, the pitching is been completely steadied. Starting pitching, especially Dallas Keuchel, continues. He had another great start this week coming off. So he's had 3 in a row after having 2 bad ones coming off the DL. Mike Fiers, he's been really struggling the last month after carrying the team for about 2 months, but he had a start where he had 7 innings and 1 earned run against Washington in the midweek. And so he got his first win in a month. And then Colin McHugh, been up and down, but he's been up the last 2 starts. So he went 6 innings, gave up only 1 run, and struck out 8 last night. So the starters look pretty solid. Brad Peacock got another win this past week. They're still looking to get Lance McCullers back. And I'll mention in the injuries in a bit, but the starters really have turned it around. And then also the bullpen. 2 weeks ago, I was talking about how terrible the bullpen was, but they've turned it around as well. You guys mentioned Joe Musgrove last week, but he's, again, 16 1/3 innings since moving to the pen. He has a 0.52 ERA. So AJ Hinch really has trusted him this past week on both Wednesday and last night. He was put in the 8th inning in a 2-1 game. So that's high leverage, high risk situation. And AJ Hinch really trusts Musgrove in those spots. And so if he can lock down one of those late inning roles. He with Ken Giles on the back end. Chris Davinsky got out of a bases loaded situation with Mike Trout at the plate last night. If he can get back to his pre-All-Star break form, and then Will Harris coming off the disabled list, hopefully soon and healthy and effective, then I think the bullpen should be okay as well. They still really need a loogie, I think. The Francisco Liriano thing hasn't really worked out to this point. I don't believe Tony Sipp's going to come back off the disabled list and contribute to the team. So that potentially is still an issue, but I think with Musgrove's emergence in the bullpen, I think they're going to be okay, I think. The problem right now is the offense. They're just not scoring runs. And I think losing Carlos Correa for 2 months, they fared pretty well the first month, but it's just come back to bite them now. The only guy really hitting the lineup is Alex Bregman and Josh Reddick. Those two are on fire. And then JD Davis, who's come up from, he started this year in AA, went to AAA, and then he got called up with all the injuries in the infield. And he's been really struggling, but back-to-back games he hit home runs, and last night his home run proved to be the difference in the win. So they're getting contributions here and there from guys, but they're still missing Carlos Correa. You don't lose a guy who's an MVP candidate and just replace him with fill-in guys. As far as injuries, Brian McCann and Evan Gattis have both returned off the disabled list. And then they have a bunch of guys that are going out on rehab assignments: Will Harris, Carlos Correa, Lance McCullers. And they were all in AA Corpus Christi, but obviously with the hurricane, they all got moved to Frisco in AAA. So we'll see. I think they're still 2 weeks away for Correa and McCullers. As far as the standings go, there's still 5 ahead of the Red Sox for the home field advantage in the American League. So, they just need to get their guys back healthy, and we'll see if this team can hold on. I think they're still in a pretty solid position with that. So this upcoming week for schedule, they finish up a series against the Angels, and then they come home for series against the Rangers and the Mets.
And it sounds like a real interesting schedule there. On the Rangers side, things have actually been looking up, which, like we said last week, is like, what the heck? After the trade deadline, what the heck? They split the series against the White Sox, winning 2 out of the 4 games. And then they won the series against the Angels, going 3-1 in the 4-game series. And then last night they ended up losing to the A's 3-1, but that's only the first game of the series. But for the past 15 games, they've won 11, which is pretty good, and has actually put them back in contention to possibly make it into the playoffs, which, that's great, but also at the same time you have to think we just traded away one of our best players, but again, neither here nor there, and we can beat this dead horse all day, so no need to. Now, with the White Sox, it wasn't great to split the series, but they only lost the games that they lost were by 1 run, and they had one game where they pretty much went completely off. It was 17-7 by the end. It was also a game that Martin Perez pitched, and he still ended up winning despite the fact that he gave up 7 runs. But nonetheless, good on him. Honestly, this whole week, the starting pitching has been pretty solid. Martin Perez ended up following up, giving up 7 runs with giving up 0 runs. Cole Hamels has been his solid self. Andrew Cashner has been decent. Really the only person that hasn't been good has been Tyson Ross. And Tyson Ross, I think at this point is just he's just struggling so much to get back from injury. And so I think at this point it's just, he might be someone that I don't know if he's ever really going to be a solid option to be a starting pitcher at the major league level from here on out. But for his sake, I hope he's able to. Bush and Gallo ended up colliding, and then both ended up kind of going on the DL, with Bush going on the DL due to MCL sprain and Gallo being put on the DL due to concussion protocol.
That was a nasty collision.
Yeah, no, it was not fun. But, at least with Gallo, he should be back next week. Bush's injury really affected the series against the Angels because it stretched our bullpen thin and might end up kind of carrying over to the rest of the series going forward. Speaking of the bullpen, right now, some big problems popping up are that Leclerc is struggling, but Barnett has actually been doing real well since the All-Star break, posting a 2.79 ERA. Right now, Claudio might be a little bit overworked just because he's pretty much like your best loogie, and then also on top of that, he's kind of your long man at the same time. So really need to watch out for that guy. But right now, going with a closer by committee system, and so far it's been pretty decent with Claudio, Barnett, and new addition Ricky Rodriguez all getting saved this week. Follow up with Jonathan Lucroy. When we traded him, it was supposed to be a player to be named later, and that later is now. So that player is going to be Pedro Gonzalez, who's sort of a fringe prospect. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not this guy can make it further, but if not, then it's totally understandable. With Gomez, has a back cyst that has been keeping him on the DL. He should be back Saturday. It's going to be interesting to see especially since he's been missing so many games this season. I think the Rangers are going to be able to sign him at an affordable contract, possibly at another 1-year one, just so that he can, again, try proving himself. But I think at this point, this might be the last time he gets a chance for a long-term contract. So he might willingly take a 4-year deal at a smaller rate versus just a 1-year deal. Diekman is finally out on rehab assignments, and he should be one of the September call-ups once rosters expand. And so far in the wild card race, the Rangers are now 2 games back behind Minnesota, Los Angeles Angels, and Seattle and Kansas City. And so next week, like you said, they will be facing off against the Houston Astros, along with trying to finish up this series against Oakland. And then they have another series at home against the Los Angeles Angels. Also this week, the umps staged a small protest against verbal abuse against them from players at one point wearing wristbands. And it looks like MLB has taken ump side on this by fining Ian Kinsler $10,000 for a verbal dispute that he had with Angel Hernandez. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't anything new in sports. It goes across any of the different leagues and different sports where umpires and referees are always criticized. It's always kind of just been part of the territory of being one of those jobs where you are going to open yourself up to criticism. I think wearing the wristbands, they can do that if they want to, but I kind of back the players on this side because I mean, it's just the way it's always been. I know calling out umpires by name, I don't know if that's the best way for the players to handle it. You do want respect, I think is what the umpires, their whole point is. Sometimes they don't feel like they're respected by the players. And I think that just comes with conversation. I think if a guy calls you out in the media, I think a better way to handle it is just to, have a conversation. Because I think players in the end, if they step out of the emotion of the game, they know that the umpires are trying to do the best job they can. They don't hold personal vendettas against anybody. They're not trying to blatantly root against you or make calls against their best judgment. I mean, they're trying to do their job just like you, the best they can. And I think it'd be a beneficial, just like anything, where if you have a disagreement with somebody, maybe outside of the emotion of the game, just have a conversation and, get to know them a little bit. And maybe we won't have these public calling outs and spats where people feel disrespected.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, obviously, though, I don't know what the situation is personally, just because, I don't know, maybe things have gotten that bad, and maybe, like you said, there definitely needs to be a lot of understanding. At the same time, too, it's just one of those things where it's just umps at the same time, I understand, yes, this is your job and you're just trying to do your job. But at the same time, too, this is that it's all kind of part of the territory, and you're kind of viewed as an authority. And at the same time, while I get you want to be treated with respect, I mean, the people that are kind of leading this charge, people like Angel Hernandez, are also known among fans to not be the best out there. And so it's just I don't want to say it's when people criticize the police whenever someone dies in custody or something like that. But I mean, at the same time, it's just you kind of see the responses in terms of just an authority figure that's being called out for something that they need to definitely correct. And then maybe the person calling them out isn't saying it in the nicest of terms, but nonetheless, these people are still people of authority. It'd be nice to see them take more responsibility of that and just be what, I hear you. And while I wish you were better at expressing this and not treating me as someone that's supposed to be there at your beck and call, I do understand that part of my job is to be better at this. So at the end of the day, too, it's also interesting that Ian Kinsler ended up getting fined twice as much as Rugi did for when Rugi actually ended up literally punching another player. He only got fined $5,000 versus Ian Kinsler, who gets fined $10,000. Now, granted, obviously, Rugi ended up getting suspended 7 games versus Ian Kinsler, who didn't get any suspension at all. So it looks more like this was just making an example out of someone, and Ian Kinsler was the one that they decided to make an example of. Which, I mean, in all fairness, too, like Ian Kinsler is someone that's known for calling out umps and stuff like that. So to each their own.
Yeah, and I get the respect thing. I just think like umpires, referees. I mean, I have great respect for Joey Crawford in the NBA, but the game isn't about you. People pay their hard-earned money to go to games to watch the players. They don't go to watch the referees or umpires. And if you make the game about you, then I don't think you're doing your job as a referee or umpire.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, like at the end of the day, people pay to watch the players play. They don't pay to watch you be the star, you know? I mean, the best umpires are the ones that you never really notice, which is in a way kind of the sad reality of it. And maybe this is another criticism of the umps too, is just that this just also feels like they're just trying to draw attention to themselves again, which just to me kind of rubs me a little bit the wrong way. But I mean, nonetheless, like if this is really a big problem, yeah, they have every right to protest it and complain about it. And I mean, it looks like they've been able to get through to the MLB's commissioner. So it looks like it was effective. Let's move on to brawl between the Yankees and Tigers. 8 people were ejected, including Miggy, Andrew Romine, Joe Girardi, Alex Wilson, and Dylan Betances. Honestly, the worst timing for someone like the Yankees to be doing this, because the Yankees are still in contention for the playoffs, and I think more than likely they still will make it in, but like right now they're like still in a battle for the AL East, and if they lose any of their good players, they lose their manager. I mean, obviously, like so long as Aaron Judge is not involved, like I think they should be okay, but this is not a good sign for sure. What's your take?
Yeah, I think this is a situation where the Yankees have to be the better man, I guess. Detroit's a team they're just frustrated. They've had a really bad season, and Miguel Cabrera is a guy who's declining in his mid-30s, and he's frustrated by probably the situation he's in. And you just got to be better than that. And you're in the middle of a wild card race. You're in the middle of a pennant race in the American League East. You can't be getting into brawls with the Tigers like that. And you don't see that in baseball. Usually, I mean, if a guy gets hit by a pitch, maybe the guy goes out there, and we saw what happened with Bryce Harper and Hunter Strickland. But usually it's just 2 guys. But this was right at the plate where Cabrera he shoved the Yankees catcher, and then they just got at it, and then the benches cleared, and it was like the guys are on the ground and swinging away, and you don't usually see that. So not a good situation for anybody, especially with a lot of guys making a lot of money on the field, and there always seems to be some sort of injury when you come to guys that try to fight when they're not paid to fight. So
yeah, no. Well, actually, the news already came out that the suspensions have already been decided. Miggy Cabrera is going to be out 7 games. The Yankees are going to be out both of their catchers, Gary Sanchez and Austin Romine. Gary is going to be out for 4 games. Austin Romine is going to be out for 2 games. No word yet on whether or not Girardi is going to be out. Alex Wilson is going to be out 4 games, and Brad Asmus, manager of the Detroit Tigers, is going to be out 1 game. So yeah, not great news for the Yankees. I mean, like I totally get how frustrated Miggy has to be at this point. But yeah, I mean, this being out 7 games when you've been playing in the league for that long, just doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and also I just want to briefly mention, if you haven't seen it, when guys clear the benches, the guys in the bullpen are obligated to run out there as well to support their teammates. But they obviously have a really long way to run from the outfield all the way to the infield. And so I think a really funny gif where David Robertson, a bullpen pitcher, was sprinting in, and he has his Yankees jacket on, and he's just running really. It looks pretty funny, him sprinting in ahead of the other relievers. So I haven't seen that. It's pretty funny.
For sure. Let's move on to the NFL. Texans had a game against the Patriots. It was their second preseason game. Take it away.
Yeah, so they won the game. Clap, clap. But the news this past week was basically the quarterback battle is over. Tom Savage is named a starter. I mean, we talked about this throughout training camp and first couple of weeks of preseason. He hasn't done anything wrong that would warrant him losing the starting quarterback job. And he was really solid in the game against the Patriots, went 8 for 9, 67 yards, a touchdown, 125.7 QB rating. So he's going to be the starter for now. Deshaun Watson kind of struggled in that second preseason game, went only 3 for 10 for 102 yards, did score a rushing touchdown. But again, he's just so raw and so young. I mean, obviously you can see the talent there. You can see the poise there. But rookie quarterbacks in the league, I mean, you don't see a lot of them that start right off the bat. Last year, Dak Prescott, I mean, a lot of fans keep pointing Dak Prescott, but Prescott only got the starting job because of all the injuries ahead of him at that starting quarterback position. And the Texans just believe that Savage has earned the opportunity. He hasn't done anything wrong. And Watson can just use a little bit of seasoning and grooming and learning the playbook, getting familiar with the receivers, getting used to the speed of the NFL game. So I don't think it's a big controversy. Savage was expected to be the starter. I do think that if he starts to struggle, the leash is not that long for him, so that the Texans have a really great defense and they want to win now. So if he just comes out and struggles, Bill O'Brien's not going to let him struggle for the whole season. It's probably going to be, and he's probably going to give him at least 4 games or so. But after that, if it just continues to snowball downward, then I think he's going to have to make the move. As far as other positions, Deontay Foreman continues to look good. He had 83 combined yards last week and a touchdown. Wide receivers, a lot of injuries in that position, but Jalen Strong, again, has looked pretty good in preseason. I guess the knock on him is he's looked pretty good every preseason. So whether or not he turns that into regular season success is a big question mark. And then Bruce Ellington, who's battling to make the team as maybe a number 4, number 5 wide receiver. He was with the Jets before and the 49ers, but he had a good outing last week, 5 catches, 93 yards, had a jump ball catch against Butler of the Patriots, who's their top corner. So that was an impressive outing by him. Defensively, they haven't really gone 100%. It's just a preseason, but I mean, JJ Watt looks solid. He doesn't look like he has any injury concerns with his back after last year. Big question mark, though, continues to be linebackers and coverage. Texans really wanted to upgrade their speed at that position and their coverage ability because that's something they really struggled at. And last week, rookie Zach Cunningham got burned by Rex Burkhead on a out route out of the backfield, and he got beat up the field. So that's something they need to fix because that was the biggest weakness of their defense last year was linebackers and coverage. But they play, they've been practicing in New Orleans this week, and they play the Saints in the third preseason game. So hopefully we see the starters into the third quarter. We'll see the reps between Savage and Watson. Obviously, Savage is a starter, so you would expect him to see a lot of reps tonight.
For sure, yeah. And also shout out to Rex Burkhead, who's a former Plano High School standout. So, yeah.
Plano.
Yeah. He was not a part of the Wolfpack, but he was part of, I think it was the Plano Cougars or something like that. Anyway, going on to the Cowboys, they won their game against the Colts. Dak Prescott got to play a series, and it was just smooth sailing. I mean, he hit all his players, and he was able to go throw a 25-yard touchdown, I believe. It was just so smooth, and it was just after that, then they just put in their backups. And the interesting thing now is that there might actually be a quarterback controversy, but not with who's going to start, but who's going to be the backup. And Cooper Rush actually performed real well this past game. Didn't throw any interceptions. I think he threw at least 1 touchdown. I wasn't really paying too much attention, but I mean, compared to Kellen Moore, who hasn't really been he has not been setting the world on fire against the other team's backups. It's looking more and more like Cooper Rush might actually be a better backup option, which, makes some sense, but, it is what it is. Next week, they play against the Raiders. Anything that's really stood out from that Indianapolis game, though, the biggest thing I would say is probably the fact that Jalen Smith finally got some reps and actually looked pretty decent. I mean, his lateral movement is still very stiff, and that's probably going to be taking a while even more to get that back. But I mean, his straight line speed looks like he did, when he runs in a straight line, it doesn't look like he's missed a step in. I mean, again, considering the fact that he basically destroyed one of the main nerves up and down his leg, the fact that he's at least getting close to that is phenomenal and a testament to how hard he's worked. So congrats to him to at least make it back onto an NFL field. I guess also another news too. There's been a lot of controversy about, obviously the protests and whatnot, and Jerry Jones has weighed in, talking about how he's like, no, I want my players to stand, which is, I mean, funny considering he also is totally fine with his players beating up women. So at this point, like I know like it's not super popular about like talking about politics in sports, but I mean like the players themselves are bringing it up, and this is just like it's not something that is going to go away. The biggest protest so far has actually been the Cleveland Browns. Funnily enough, you're also beginning to see a lot of white NFL players beginning to support their black teammates, and so it's nice to see some solidarity there. And like even the fact that they've decided not to hire back Kaepernick, you're still seeing his influence, and it's even bigger now. Let's move on to college football. So AP polls are out. Alabama obviously is number 1. Ohio State's going to be number 2. Florida State number 3. USC number 4. Clemson number 5. And then in terms of Big 12, you have Oklahoma at number 7. Oklahoma State at number 10. And then Kansas City at number 20. And then West Virginia at number 22. And then UT at number 23. Which is very interesting to see, considering obviously how UT for the past 2 years have finished with losing records, and now they're going to be with a new coach. And even though we know that this new coach was one of the big reasons why Houston finished in the top 25 last year, we also it's also hard to really see if like, hey, if this guy's going to really gel. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, so the top 4 teams, I guess, a lot of people think they're going to be the favorites to make the playoff. And Alabama, obviously, every year they're a contender. And this year, I think they're actually returning a bunch of starters, where as the last 2 years, they had a very inexperienced team. Ohio State was one of the teams that was a big surprise last year. They were so young, and they made it to the playoff. Obviously got smashed by Clemson in the semifinal, but they look to return a really strong squad. And then obviously JT Barrett's the quarterback. He's been there 3 years. So you expect him to have a bounce back year after he was a little bit disappointing last year. Florida State has a returning quarterback in DeAndre Francois, and they have a really good defense. And so that first week, Alabama, Florida State, that's a potential playoff preview between those two teams that have title contention. And the USC is a trendy pick because of their experience as well. And Sam Darnold, their quarterback. Big 12 wise, I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are, but I think the consensus is the 2 Oklahoma teams are the favorite. Oklahoma obviously changing head coaches and Lincoln Riley being the head coach now with Bob Stoops retiring. Oklahoma State is an experienced squad as well. And then people are saying other contenders are Texas, Kansas State, West Virginia maybe. So, I mean, Texas, what are your thoughts on the Horns coming this year, coming off back-to-back 5-7?
I mean, again, it's just like this. Before we were saying like, oh, this is a young team, let them grow in. And then just like after last year, it became very clear that like Charlie Strong was just not a very good coach. Part of it also is just that like we don't really know what to expect from this team, because this team is now a veteran team by definition. You have players that were first brought in by Charlie Strong, people like Malik Jefferson and Connor Williams, now in their 3rd year, and this is quite possibly going to be the last year for both of them, considering that they're very much people that could go in the first round next year. But nonetheless, it will be interesting to see how Tom Herman gets the most out of these players. I think it's very possible that this team can go 8-4, especially considering the fact that, to me at least, I honestly think that the Big 12 is still very weak. And even though Oklahoma and Oklahoma State have somewhat veteran teams, I mean, granted, obviously Oklahoma is will always be a powerhouse. But I think it's very possible that UT is able to get at least one win out of these guys. And then obviously going against teams like Kansas State and West Virginia, teams that Texas last year was able to either beat or come close at least. Now that they're going to have a better coach, UT has a chance to go for a winning record and finally go back to a bowl game. But I don't want to expect too much out of this team, especially considering that these are the same players that were playing under Charlie Strong and were not able to deliver. Now, that also being said, Tom Herman, I think at this point is going to have a lot more time to build this roster versus Charlie, who was put into the situation right away and was expected to get results right away. And so at least with Tom Herman, he's not going to have that it's going to be hard for me to say that he's not going to have that pressure. I mean, especially when you consider the fact that he's actually already been pretty good at recruiting. I think it should be good enough. I think he should be good enough to help out for sure.
Yeah, I think 8 wins is very reachable, and I actually wouldn't be surprised if they get to 9. I'm looking at their schedule right now. Obviously, their toughest matchup is week 3 against USC in Los Angeles. USC, as we mentioned, number 4 in the AP poll. That's going to be a tough test for Tom Herman right off the bat. But their road games this year in the Big 12 at Iowa State, that shouldn't be a tough matchup. Granted, that's on a Thursday night as well. And then at Baylor, at TCU, those are 2 teams that aren't expected to be that good this year. Baylor obviously has a big rebuilding program after all those suspensions and Art Briles leaving. TCU is not expected to be a contender this year. And then at West Virginia, that's going to be a tough game at the end of this year. But also the way it worked out, they don't leave the state of Texas from October 7th all the way to November 18th. They play Kansas State at home, then they play Oklahoma in Dallas. They play Oklahoma State at home, then they're at Baylor at TCU. So in terms of travel, they don't leave the state of Texas for 2 months. And so I think that's going to be a good thing for them. So I'm really looking at 9 wins for this team. I guess I might be a bit of an optimist and drinking the Tom Herman Kool-Aid, but I wouldn't be surprised if this team goes 9-3.
9-3. That's pretty optimistic, man. I would say like 9-3 is very optimistic considering everything. But as someone that was saying 8-4, like it's very possible they win one more extra game. So it's going to be interesting. USC, Oklahoma are always going to be very tough tests, but especially this year now that both have something to definitely prove, with USC trying to get back into saying like, hey, we're for sure back. We're going to be trying to recapture the magic of the mid 2000s. And then you have Oklahoma obviously saying like, hey, we can win without Bob Stoops. Those 2 games for sure, I think like are going to be real tough tests. And at this point, like if you're a Texas fan, if they keep the games close for both, then that should be considered a win. Yeah,
by no means am I saying if they don't get 9 wins, I'll be disappointed. I will gladly sign up for 8-4 this year after 5-7, 5-7.
Honestly, I would sign up for 7-5. Like,
right?
Like I just want to go back to a bowl game, But yeah, we'll see. We'll see
how far have we dropped.
We've dropped far. Yeah, absolutely, we have.
Happy to make a bowl game.
Yeah, no, that's the situation we're in. Beggars can't be choosers. So yeah. No worries, though. No worries. But yeah, let's move on to MLS. The Texas Derby was this week, and it was a tie.
Yeah, I caught most of it. I missed the final goal of the comeback, but basically it was a 3-3 draw in Frisco. It was the 3rd match of their 3 that they were scheduled to play in the regular season, and they ended up tying all 3 matches. And so the tiebreakers in the Texas Derby, El Capitan, so they have a cannon from the mid 1800s that they play for each year, and the winner gets to keep it for 1 year. It's kind of like the Stanley Cup, and the tiebreaker is basically the person that had the cannon before gets to keep it. So with 3 draws, it looks like Houston's going to keep it for a 2nd straight year. The Dynamo, they had a strange lineup. Defensively, they came out. They had a lot of starters out. AJ De La Garza, their normal right back, had a yellow card accumulation. He couldn't play. DeMarcus Beasley couldn't play. He was resting. And then Leonardo was also resting. So they had a lot of fill-in guys there. And then Juan David Cabezas, who's their anchor in the midfield, defensively at least, he was out with yellow card accumulation. So they got a goal in basically the first minute. Vicente Sanchez, we've mentioned he's 38. He's near the end of his career. He basically only plays about 30 minutes a game at the end as a substitute. But head coach Wilmer Cabrera started him. He got a deflection from Matt Hedges in the first half, and then he raced in, and Cubo Torres laid it off to him, and he scored in the first minute. So it's 1-0. And the Dynamo defense actually played pretty well for most of the first half, holding up against FC Dallas's attack. And then the final minute, they concede 2 stunning goals to Dallas. And so it goes into halftime 2-1, and then it comes out second half, and Dallas just completely dominates the possession. They get all the chances. They get another goal and it's 3-1. It looked like it would be like 5-1 at some point because it just looked like Dallas, which has been in a coma scoring goals the past month and a half, they woke up. But in the end, it was Dallas' defense let them down. Dino got 2 goals. Cubo Torres scored the 2 goals to tie the game, and he passed Brian Ching for the club record. So I think just the resiliency from the team that we've been missing the last 3 or 4 years from a really young squad. And I think they're buying into everything Wilmer Cabrera is preaching to them. And I mean, their road record isn't spectacular. They still just a dominant home team and it's just a pretty bad road team, but you can see the building blocks and the confidence for the team staying there. And they're right now 4th in the West at 38 points. They're 3 behind Seattle for first. Really, they just want to stay in the top 4 and get that home field in a potential knockout round. But yeah, I'm just really pleased by the game on Wednesday night against FC Dallas. And they were going to play tonight against Kansas City, which would have been a huge match for first in the West, but it got postponed because of Hurricane Harvey. So yeah, good vibes from the Dynamo this past week. I guess what is your perspective from FC Dallas's point of view?
I mean, the slide continues for FC Dallas. I mean, it's just like ever since like really the Gold Cup, even getting back these players, they've kind of really lacked any sort of like fire or passion. Like at first, like this Texas Derby game, like you'd expect like, oh, okay, they were up like 3-1. It seemed like they were really motivated, but then they just seemed to have taken their foot off the gas, and that ended up coming to bite them in the butt. So it's hard to see what's going on, and if they've just sort of like lost focus, especially after like how well they were playing last year and how intense and how focused they were last year. You know, it's hard to tell what's going on. But at the same time, too, it is what it is. And, you know, I mean, like this team's going to do what this team's going to do. And if that means that this team doesn't make the playoffs, that's unfortunately the truth. But I think this team can still pull it together and turn it around. But it's just going to take a lot more focus out of them to go do it.
Yeah, I think defensively, just Hernan Grana, he made the All-Star team, but he hasn't looked good at all the last couple of weeks. And then Matt Hedges, seems like every time he plays the Dino, he makes a crucial mistake that leads to a goal. And then they finally got contributions offensively from Maxi Urruti and Tesho, Michael Barrios, but it's when their defense is good, their offense isn't, and then when their offense is good, their defense isn't. And that just that's the sign of a team that's really struggling. But in terms of expansion, MLS filed a trademark this past week, I guess, for a potential franchise in Austin. They're looking to expand by 4 more teams by 2020, and a lot of different cities are up for it. Honestly, in my opinion, I think Sacramento should get a team. They have a really passionate fan base there. Cincinnati is drawing 35,000 for U.S. Open Cup games, so they're a very good candidate as well. Charlotte, potentially. St. Louis has a hole with the Rams gone. San Diego has a hole with the Chargers gone. But the 2 Texas cities are also up for it, are San Antonio and Austin. I guess what are your thoughts on just potentially, like, which city would you prefer? I think San Antonio has an established fan base, and they have a USL team, and it's affiliated with the Spurs, and they have the passion, I guess, with the Hispanic population. Austin's kind of a city that has a lot of young people that are potentially more into soccer and international flavor. So I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I mean, in terms of Central Texas, like if I had to choose, I would choose San Antonio, even though I live in Austin. I mean, like, honestly, like I don't like, well, I think there's a lot of passion for it. Like I think the people that would be passionate for a local soccer team would be more than willing to travel an hour to go see it in San Antonio versus like in San Antonio, you have a lot of families that can't make that hour drive, you know, but would willingly, like if it was in town, like they would definitely go and definitely want to bring their kids to go see a soccer game. And I'd say like with Austin too, it's even though, yeah, it's definitely a young city, it's not nearly as diverse as some might have expected in terms of demographics that actually prefer watching soccer. But you know, it is what it is. Honestly, yeah, I would say probably San Antonio would be the better one. Maybe I mean, I don't know how you go about doing it. Maybe you end up like promoting Spurs FC or something like that. I'm not too sure, but yeah, I'd say San Antonio would be like, if I had to choose another place in Texas, it would probably be San Antonio. El Paso might be interesting, but I mean, I mean, I don't know what the situation is with El Paso, and it's also kind of controversial in and of itself, considering that they tried opening up an arena at one recently, but that one's been struck down just because like it was going to displace a lot of people in the entire community. So yeah, I would say Sacramento for sure would be a good one. As well as also, I would say, like you said, pointing out to teams that lost other professional teams to root for. I mean, honestly, NFL's decision to move people around has created more interest and more of a need for people to be distracted. And so, yeah, definitely going to places like San Diego and St. Louis would probably be pretty smart.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of a criticism nationally on MLS in Texas, how it really hasn't worked out with the Dynamo and FC Dallas in terms of attendance. But again, I mean, we've talked about this before, but I mean, FC Dallas's stadium situation where they're just located in a suburb that's 45 minutes from downtown. Yeah. And especially those weeknight games, it's going to be tough. And then the Dynamo have shown that they can draw 20,000 plus every game. It's just, again, Houston admittedly is not a passionate sports city and kind of fair weather. So if the team goes through a period of struggles, it's going to take a while for the fans to come back. I mean, we're even seeing that with the Astros, where midweek against the Nationals, a potential World Series preview, they only drew like 28,000 fans for a couple of those games. I mean, it's still the Astros coma of 5 years where they were horrible is still affecting that team. And that team is the best team in the American League. I'm in a big three sport. So I don't buy the criticism that soccer can't work in Texas. There's so many passionate soccer fans. Again, that we had that friendly at NRG Stadium with Man City and Man U, and that was 70,000 sold out. And MLS just has to do a better job, and the clubs as well, of reaching out to fans of the game to watch MLS. And part of that's just coming with the quality of the game. When you get better players, you can get better games, and people want to watch the best. And the quality of the league is just not as good as Europe right now. But I think I don't buy the criticism that MLS can't work in Texas and should leave.
Yeah, I don't think I was saying that they should leave, but yeah, I mean that's the first I've heard people saying that MLS should leave. Like, no,
maybe I should just stop reading MLSsoccer.com comments then.
Yeah, you probably should. You should. Like, why? The fact that you're reading them in the first place is kind of concerning. But yeah, no, I mean, it's just like, yeah, I mean, no, it's. I mean, yeah, it's interesting that they've struggled with attendance, but I think part of it is also like, I mean, like those two cities have either 3 to 4 other professional sports teams that like people like to follow and have already an established fan base. I mean, especially even Dallas with hockey. I mean, like you have the Stars, and they're a very good team, and they have already an established tradition in Dallas. I mean, it's just a matter of them being able to garner a foothold. I mean, like. The team that was closest to ever winning an MLS Cup was FC Dallas, and unfortunately they lost that game back in 2010. But yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of just trying to get a breakthrough and establish any sort of tradition, really.
And like, I think people just point to the success stories lately. Orlando City is one that just came and instantly blossomed. Seattle as well, Portland. But those are, I mean, Seattle and Portland especially, those are cities with 80 years of soccer tradition of people supporting that team up there for that long. And I don't know, it's a problem between the older cities of MLS. And I mean, we've seen success stories like Kansas City. They're an original franchise and they turned it around, and now they have like one of the best fan bases. But like even in New York City, you would think the biggest city in the world, and having like such a diverse group of people and people that moved here from Europe and South America and a bunch of different places, the New York Red Bulls really struggled to get a foothold on that market. And New York City FC has done a better job at that, but I mean, they still have stadium situation problems as well. So yeah. I mean, I have a problem. Like, it's an MLS problem in general, not
for sure
MLS in Texas problem.
Yeah, and like, I mean, part of the reason why like New York FC was actually able to like do well is because they were able to sign all these like big name players like David Villa. You know, like, I mean, I mean, a lot of it is just like getting star power in and of itself. And it's just like, honestly, I mean, and no offense to FC Dallas or Houston Dynamo, but I mean, like, they don't really have like a star player, you know. I mean, like, they've been able to generate like great talent for sure. Absolutely. I mean, obviously Kellen Acosta being one of the biggest names in terms of players playing in Texas right now. But I mean, sometimes it's just a matter of luck. I mean, like you have someone like Weston McKennie who went up through the entire FC Dallas Academy program. And then when it came time to sign, he ended up going to Schalke 04 for the Bundesliga. And now he's playing. He's actually getting playing time for a Bundesliga team at the age of 18. So, I mean, it's just like, unfortunately, sometimes it's just a matter of luck and a matter of timing, so.
All right, let's move on to shoutouts.
Aaron Judge ends his streak of 37 straight games with a strikeout, which is now a major league record and is actually kind of a bit concerning considering, this guy was is still an MVP candidate, more than likely going to win Rookie of the Year for sure. It's sort of like, oh, this is an interesting part of his game that he kind of strikes out a lot.
Yeah, and shout out to Rich Hill. He pitched a great game on Wednesday night in Pittsburgh. He had a perfect game through 8 innings, and then there's an error in the ninth, so he lost his perfect game. But the Dodgers couldn't score a run for him. So he had no hitter through 9, but they had 8 hits and they couldn't get any of them home. And it went into the 10th inning. Rich Hill went out there and he gave up a walk-off home run to Josh Harrison. And so he lost his no-hitter shutout and the game. And so tough luck for Rich Hill. The Dodgers seem like they've been bit by the no-hitter bug lately. I think a couple of years ago they got no-hit like 3 times, and I mean this time they're on the other end where they had a guy who should have gotten a no-hitter, but they just couldn't score a run for him.
Yeah, just kind of unfortunate, but again, like that's sometimes how the world works. And then Matt, last shout out, Mayweather versus McGregor is tonight. Yeah, we have the same opinion of it.
It's 2 despicable human beings that just are going to make a crap load of money, and is it really going to be worth paying $100 of HBO money to watch that? I'm not.
It's not. No, I mean, it's just like it's kind of disgusting to me that like we put all this like attention onto something that onto these 2 people that like just who just are just so just like people that you can so totally despise. I mean, like granted, like yeah, they definitely are like. I mean, I know we were talking about stars in MLS, and like technically, yeah, they have like that charisma, but it's just like they're also just so. I hate them so much because of like the people who they are, and the fact of the matter is like people are still going to pay like X amount of money to see it because because they find it interesting and they're drawn to it. But it's just also like, why at this point are we doing this? So much other good programming in terms of sports out there, and yet like you want to spend like a $99 on watching a domestic abuser and a racist try to attempt to punch each other. It's just like,
yeah. And I mean, we know about all the problems in boxing, and I mean, Floyd Mayweather is another whole new podcast about him alone. But I mean, if you have a champion who loses to a guy in his first boxing match, I mean, what does that say about your sport? So, I mean, I don't expect it to be much of a fight. And I mean, Mayweather, I mean, he doesn't really go for the knockouts anyways. He just kind of jabs away and then ducks. So, I mean, it might just be one of those where it's like underwhelming, like Pacquiao fight was, where it's just like, why you bother wasting your time with that?
Oh yeah, like that's another thing too. It's just like, why does anyone want to watch like Mayweather after what was supposed to be the fight of the century? Like, just like completely just was nothing. It was absolutely nothing,
I mean, I would have rather watched golf than that. I mean, that was
it was so bad. God. I mean, I'm just like, I ended up just pulling money with a bunch of other people, so we ended up just like not only paying like $1 to $2 just to watch it. So it wasn't that bad, but even still, it's just like I can't believe I gave money to see that. It's bad.
Yeah, so I want you guys to visit our website, TwoNatesOnSports.com. Also like us on Facebook at Two Nates on Sports. Subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play Music, where you'll get a notification as soon as we release our new episodes. Also, you can email us and leave us a comment at TwoNatesOnSports@gmail.com. Nathan, I'll talk to you next week.
Talk to you then, man.